Welcome to the Leadership Sovereignty Podcast. I'm your host, Ralph Owens, along with Terry Baylor. In Effective Leadership Part 5, Larry Cheatham dives into the story of the pipeline. He talks about the system of the financial matrix, and then he dives into the power of identifying a big problem, providing a solution, and the reward.
And let me say this really quick to make sure that people kind of understand how you move through. And I often take liberties with Kiyosaki's story, but he gives this great example in the book, right? He called it the parable of the pipeline. And in the book, there was a village where the well had gone dry with all their water. Miles away from the well was a fresh body of water, and everyone is in the village is told, well, we'll pay you to bring water to the well. Most people show up to a company, they're handed 2 buckets, one for each hand. They fill the buckets up, carry it over to the well, and they go back and forth 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, for about 45 years, 20s to 60s. And then they retire on 1/2 to 2/3 of what they hadn't been bragging about at the top of the pay scale in their profession, and thus traded time for money.
Yes.
The S-type business owner in the book would have said, hey, you know what? I know there's water. I can go buy buckets. I'm going to go buy my own buckets, and I'm going to pay other people to carry the water, except some days people don't show up, to pick up the buckets. So the person has their spouse bust the tables and work the register, right? Sometimes people wreck.
We need to have more kids.
Yeah,
they carry these buckets.
Right. They wreck the equipment, right? They tear up the buckets. In other words, they drop the plates, the glasses. They tear up a piece of equipment in the kitchen. And sometimes, like I said, it's just they don't care about the business the same way the person who bought the buckets and hired them to carry the bucket. So it doesn't run the same when the owner of the bucket carrying company isn't there. And we're trained to go get educations, right? So that we can become senior bucket carrier in charge of the A division.
I'm the senior bucket carrier.
Hey, I got a platinum bucket, but it's still a bucket.
It's still a bucket. But in the book, he talks about how these people built a pipeline from the source of water over to the well. Now, most of the people in the village didn't know how to do it, but there was 5% of the people who did know how to do it. And they said, I'll train you how to do it. And so let's say I go, oh, you know what? I'm going to pay for an education. Well, you're going to need some equipment. What do I need? Oh, you're going to need, maybe a backhoe to dig a trench, and you're going to need some rivets and pipes, and back to, seed, right? And toiling and working and so you're 6 months into building this pipeline, and it's not delivering water, so the village isn't paying you. They don't pay you to build a pipeline. They pay you to deliver water.
That's good.
And once the pipeline is complete, listen, go lay down, turn the water on to your tub, and leave it running and see if that water doesn't overflow. It will flow whether you're sleeping, whether you're on vacation. If you died laying in your bed, that water will continue to flow.
That's right.
And thus, thinking that scenario, the product is water in each case. The employee and self-employed focused on the product. Oh, I got the best food in the world. I got the best water. Oh, you know what? I'm good at carrying water. Look at me. I can carry 3 buckets at a time. But
I have lighter buckets.
I have lighter buckets.
Made out of different material.
That's
right?
it.
Yeah.
But the B-type business owner, the difference for them is they never focused on the product. They focused on the system. The pipeline is the system. And so the system delivered that water. And once you have systems in place, now you have ongoing income, because the village, remember, they pay you not to carry buckets. They pay you to deliver water.
Yeah.
So they don't care that you're not carrying the buckets, as long as that water is showing up to the well.
Yeah.
So
we
got to focus on system.
Hey, I remember when I heard that story, I was like, I'm putting my buckets down, bro. Because I was a great bucket carrier. Exactly. Oh, my gosh.
We've been trained our whole lives to be great bucket carriers, right?
Yes.
Let me tell you the biggest revelation I got. I'm sorry. The biggest revelation I got out of that when Larry first taught that to me. I swear to you, this is exactly how it came to me. I said, either you are leveraging a system or you're being leveraged by a system. Everybody
Amen.
who's listening to this right now, you are either leveraging a system or you are being leveraged by a system. There is no way you can get away from it.
Right. So watch this. So understand, right? If that's all true, that means that we all should be focused on doing something that is B type business in nature. Because remember, most of the people who make it to the I quadrant, most of them come from the B quadrant, right? And so we should be focused on some type of B type business. And unfortunately, most people get it confused and they think they're doing something that's B type, and they're in fact nothing more than a glorified S type business owner when they made that track. And understand this, whatever you're doing, all business, I don't care what it is, all business is nothing more than solving a problem. The bigger the problem you solve, the greater the opportunity lies before you, right? And I want to give you an example, right? Over 100 years ago, there were some people who identified a problem, right? They had one side of here where their current financial position, and they had another place over here, which is where they wanted to be, and let's say where they wanted to be someone who had time and money. They wanted to be someone who spent time with family, who were able to travel, who was able to leave a legacy, and they weren't living the life that they wanted to live. And so they said, okay, we've identified a problem that will allow us to move from our current financial position to where we want to be. And the problem they identified, and this is a true story, this part of it's a true story. The problem they identified over 100 years ago is there were people who would get far enough away from where they lived, they couldn't sleep in their own beds. And it's like, oh, we could live the life we've always wanted if we just solve that problem. Can we create a place for them to actually sleep overnight? If we could, they pay us for that, and we can live our dream, and we can create systems around this. 100 years ago that happened. There are two that come to mind. Today, one of them is called Marriott. The other one's called Hilton. They both got their start over 100 years ago, solving that problem.
Wow.
So I tell people, you're going to have to find a problem to solve, a big one to solve. And so, listen, for me, that's what somebody did for me. When I talk about helping today people find their way out, I just was blessed enough to actually come across a massive problem and a way of solving that problem. And that problem revolved around debt, inflation, taxes, fees, and it is the one thing today that's become so massive of a problem, and many people have not been able to figure out as they try and get from their current financial position. I'm talking about people who make good money. I'm talking about people who make a six-figure income. Many of them, some of them earn $50,000 a year, $60,000 a year. That's probably the majority of the people out there. And there's some who are even making a solid six-figure income, and they have run into a brick wall of debt, inflation, taxes, and fees. Inflation hits everyone. I don't care who you are. Who could have ever convinced me a dozen eggs would be $10 today for a dozen eggs?
Right.
And so we figured out a way to get around that problem and solve it. And I'll say this one thing to the problem. Do you realize, Ralph and Terry, that last year the credit card industry made 300 billion on $1.2 trillion at almost 25% interest.
Wow.
You understand that $300 billion is more profit? That was their profits. That is more in profits than the entire profits collected by the NFL.
Wow.
Matter of fact, it's more profits than collected by the NFL, the NBA, and the National Hockey League combined.
Wow.
It's a massive.
Speaking of systems, hey, it's a system.
It's a system.
It's a system. Yeah, it is a system. So Larry,
it's a very dark one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's very dark, insidious system.
Yes.
Talk.
And so,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Ralph. Can I ask? So I was want to kind of tie this all into the leadership conversation, right? Because here's the thing I'm hearing, right? Here's leaders ultimately right? A true leader, their ultimate goal is to help someone get from A to B to C to D, right? Through their journey, right,
Yes.
of life, right? And so I just want to connect all this together, right? The Bible says something about finances and its ability to solve.
Mm.
It says that money answereth how many things?
All things.
So that this is why this conversation is so important. It's not a matter of you being rich,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a matter of you as an individual. God has given us all these God-given dreams, right? And I would say at the core, Larry, I've gotten a chance to speak with you, and you've mentored me through some scenarios and just provided some great information. Ralph, everyone knows our journey together, and ultimately, what I've learned about you guys is your pursuit for wealth is not to benefit you.
Mm.
Right.
It's really to benefit others. It's to benefit the kingdom, right?
Right.
There's a bigger mission behind why you want to build this business system.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so with that being said, I'm sorry, go ahead, Larry.
No, you go ahead.
No, and I was saying, with that being said, right, in order for us to solve those issues, Jesus was a great example of that when he fed the 5,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's simple. Let me deal with your social issue. Then I can get to your spiritual issue.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And money is going to be the mechanism that allows us to deal with humanity's social issues, right? To impact the kingdom, right? To get people's, lives on the right track, thinking on the right track, families on the right track, thinking on the right track. So I just want to kind of make sure that folks see the tie and the connection.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Sovereignty Podcast. If this content blessed or helped you in any kind of way, support us today by subscribing to our YouTube channel, clicking the like button for this episode, and sharing this content with others that you think it will help. Until next time, stay safe, peace, and blessings.